Nearly 1 year after Russian forces rolled into Ukraine, authorities say around 71,000 alleged war crimes have been registered. A joint investigation team comprising prosecutors from Ukraine and other European nations convened earlier, vowing concrete steps to hold accountable those found guilty of crimes of aggression in Ukraine. First, the agency is intending to kickstart operations of a so-called core international crimes evidence database. This is to streamline the collection of proof of war crimes. And second, it will begin setting up an international centre for prosecution of aggression crimes. This was announced by EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen during her visit to Kyiv earlier this month.
Nothing can make up for the terrible loss and destruction suffered by the Ukrainian people ever since. But from day one, it became very clear that the international legal or judicial community would do whatever it takes to help bring those responsible to justice.
And for more, we're joined by CNA's Jeremy Ko live from Kyiv. Jeremy, what can you tell us about these measures aimed at addressing alleged war crimes committed in Ukraine?
Well, Wei-Su, the new centre will be embedded within a joint investigative team established last year by Lithuania, Poland, as well as Ukraine. It's just the latest international effort designed to hold Russia accountable for what it's doing here in Ukraine, as well as its invasion of Ukraine. But how will it do so? That's the big question. Several international figures have already accused Russia of accusing crimes against humanity here in Ukraine, including US Vice President Kamala Harris. Ukraine's First Lady has also urged the United Nations to establish a tribunal a special tribunal to try Russia for crimes of aggression, so that Russia doesn't do this. What Russia is doing here is not repeated anywhere else in the world. This on top of an investigation launched by the Hague-based International Criminal Court earlier this month. But while changes to the ICC's governing Rome Statute in 2018 gave it powers to prosecute member states for aggression, it cannot do so for non-member states, and neither Russia nor Ukraine are member states. And so, and because of that, the EU and Kyiv are also supporting plans to set up an international office in The Hague to help investigate Russia for crimes of aggression here in Ukraine. But no matter what, all these, probes are doing, it's going to be a long, hard process to get those accountable for their actions. That's because Russia has accused these accusations and has, in its own courts, charged 680 Ukrainian officials for breaking laws governing the conduct of war, including use of weapons against civilians. And also, even if there are any potential international arrest warrants being issued, any perpetrators can enjoy impunity as long as they remain within the borders.
Jeremy, many of us familiar with some of the headline-grabbing movements in the last few months of this war. Events in Bucha, Kramatorsk come to mind. But what do they tell us about the extent of possible war crimes in Ukraine?
Well, yes, indeed. There were truly horrific pictures which emerged from Bucha after Russian troops retreated from the area. But that's just, something that you can imagine what's happening elsewhere in Ukraine right now. We can only guess at what's happening right there. So Bucha is just a 40-minute drive away from where I am in central Kyiv. It's one of the first towns that was captured by Russians while they were trying to advance towards the Ukrainian capital. Today, the scars in that town, in Bucha, are no longer apparent. You can still see, some shrapnel, signs of shrapnel as well. But there's also massive rebuilding in that area. But people I spoke to there, the residents of Bucha, say they are very angry, even as they want to look forward, and they want to hold those accountable for what happened there to justice. Let's have a listen.
69-year-old Bucha resident Svetlana Salina was at work last year when someone told her the war had started. It wasn't long before the area she lived in was shelled and then captured by Russian forces. Svetlana, her son, daughter, son-in-law and grandson quickly moved to a shelter. They stayed there for a few days. However, her son was later captured by the Russians. She says he was beaten and tortured.
Не вважаю, що вони люди. Так не можна робити. Скільки вони тут горя в Бучі поробили, здівались над дітками маленькими. Ну тут страшний суд був, звісно, розказували, то це взагалі не можна перенести. Понімаєте, що вони робили? Не садісти, чи я не знаю, як їх назвати. Нема такого слова, не підібрати, щоб їх назвати. Не знаю.
Svetlana and her family eventually left Bucha through the wreckage of this bridge in neighboring Irpin. Ukrainian forces had destroyed the bridge to prevent Russian troops from advancing towards Kyiv. Bucha was one of the first outlying areas of the capital taken by Russian forces, but they held it for only slightly more than a month before Ukrainian forces retook the city.
Last year, when Russian troops retreated from Bucha after a brief occupation, they left behind a scene of death and destruction. Bodies were found strewn along this street and also in mass graves. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russian troops had committed war crimes and genocide here, but his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin denies those claims, claiming his troops had nothing to do with it.
Locals here, however, say they have no doubt who did it.
Жили нормально, наче брати були. Я колись у Москву хороші времена їздила до Москви, нормально було. А зараз я не знаю. Не знаю, що це за Путін. Не віриться, що такі люди є на світі, розумієте? Не знаю. Дуже тяжко, дуже це перенести, дуже тяжко. Во-первых, я дуже нервно стала, у мене в голові тільки ця війна і все. Я спати не можу спокійно, не можу.
40-year-old Andriy Levenchuk used to run a travel agency before the war. When the Russians captured Bucha, he helped to evacuate people through Irpin to safer areas at great personal risk. He says he was shot at twice. When Bucha was liberated, he helped to transport dead bodies.
For the war, I never touch a dead body, you know. And in this war, when we drive, I am drive on the street of Irpin, and I see somebody on the road, directly on the road. I don't think about it's terrible, it's died. I just took him to the car, put it in the car, and go here. Because is it people, you know, is it man in? What? Yes, he's died for now, but. They have, for him, maybe wait for families, you know, families will wait for him.
Today, though the physical and emotional scars remain, Bucha is trying to move on. Aside from this small memorial, little remains to indicate that this field once held a mass grave containing more than 100 bodies. Some were found with their hands bound and bearing signs of torture and summary execution. All across the city, damaged buildings are being rebuilt. Mikhailina Skok is the deputy mayor of Bucha.
We don't want to be Bucha just the city of tragedy. We want to become the city of Ukrainian success and Ukrainian rebuilding. So if we talk politically, the aim of Putin is to have Ukraine without Ukrainians. So the answer of Ukrainians should be we should live and fight at the same time. Ukrainians must be at their homes, and as a Bucha City Council we are working hard to do that.
At the same time, Ms. Kok says the perpetrators must be held accountable.
We want to punish every killer who did these crimes here in Bucha, and also we want to punish those who gave the orders and those who are sitting in Kremlin.
The International Criminal Court has opened an investigation into crimes committed here and elsewhere in Ukraine. But it doesn't have jurisdiction to prosecute Russia's leaders even if they are found guilty.